Welcome to the Glenn Beck program. I'm Judge Andrew Napolitano in for Glenn Beck. We've got a lot to do today, but as we do it, remember this, and they are the words of Thomas Jefferson. When the people fear the government, there is tyranny. When the government fears the people, there is liberty. You know what's coming. Let's go. There's a $1 trillion gap in retiree benefits in this country, according to the Pew Center on the states. And since state and local governments will be footing the bill for the shortfall, it works out to more than $8,800 for every American household. Now cities like Memphis, Toledo, and even Los Angeles are trying to pinch pennies by leaning on unions to pay toward their own benefits. Have unions priced themselves out of a job? Let's ask Mark Mix, president of the National Right to Work Committee, and Charles Payne, CEO of Wall Street Strategies, and my colleague, a contributor on the Fox Business Network. Charles, to you first. What's the problem? What's happening? What have governments just recognized about unions and their benefits and their pensions? They've
made promises they can't keep, and if they keep them, all heck is going to break loose, because essentially what we're talking about, Judge, 90% of these, you have all these people who work for the government. They have defined pensions. Right. They're going to be retiring 57, 60. People who are going to have to pay those pensions have to work till they're 67 years old. They have no pension. So imagine this. You're getting up every morning, going to work. You don't even have a pension. They're taking money, out of your paycheck to pay someone else sitting on the beach who retired 10 years earlier.
Mark, are these ironclad contracts that the governments that are stuck with them can't change? I mean, is this something like the UAW and General Motors, where there can only be a change if the union agrees to relent and give back? Or is there something that can be done about this, even if the unions won't play ball?
Well, Judge, I think we're going to find out. You're right. Most of these contracts are allegedly ironclad, but we have a city in California where we're actually going to get a peek at what may happen here. Vallejo, California filed Chapter 9 bankruptcy because of things that Charles talked about. They made promises they can't keep and the taxpayers can't keep. They were allowed to void one contract. A bankruptcy judge said you could void one contract. He allowed the city to set aside a couple others. But the issue about the pension is still relevant, and we're going to see, and I think a lot of municipalities and cities and counties and states, for that matter, are watching this case to see what's going to happen, because they've made promises they can't keep.
We were talking during the break about Los Angeles. The mayor of Los Angeles is a good and longtime friend and loyal supporter of the president. Even he is leaning on the unions. What's he trying to do? How bad are his problems?
He's trying to get the unions to make some sort of concessions. You know, California obviously is at the tip. You know, they've got a huge unfunded portion of their pension. Also, there are other obligations, you know, post-retirement obligations like health benefits. None of that's covered. Every single, like $48 billion, none of it's funded. They have to do something immediately.
If the unions don't cave, Mark, if the government, if the courts don't interfere, will non-union workers be working for less money so that union workers can continue to receive these higher hourly wages and these Cadillac health plans that were negotiated by the governments back when they thought the money would never run out?
Well, we're already past the Rubicon on that, Judge. I mean, government employees' benefits and pay packages are much higher than the private sector taxpayers who are paying those wages. But, you know, this problem started back in 1937, and I go back to Franklin Roosevelt, who said that the model of collective bargaining that we understand in the private sector cannot be applied to the public sector. And in 1975, we helped put out a book called The Municipal Doomsday Machine. We were about 40 years too early, but here we are, where these bargaining agreements are coming to a head in a difficult financial time, and it's exposing the difficulty that states and municipalities are going to have to fund these contracts.
All right, put the gap chart up on the screen that shows the gap, the difference between the private sector and the public sector. Isn't that crazy, Charles? That the government sector the benefits would be so fantastically greater than in the private sector?
It's absolutely amazing. I mean, if you're like in clergy, you make almost twice as much if you work for the government than the private sector. 8 out of 10, you know, job sectors, the government workers make more. So, you know, before, when we grew up, you know, sort of like, okay, you work for the government, you'll make less coming up, but you'll get, you know, you get the retirement on the back end. Now you get it both ways. And, you know, here's the thing, though, Judge. Government's getting bigger, not larger. Well, not the state and local, but the federal government, obviously, is growing like crazy.
Mark, how did we get to this point in our history where you can make more money? But this never happened before, that you would make more money doing the same job in the government that you did in the private sector. For 200 years, or maybe until FDR, maybe for 150 years, it was the other way around. How did this happen?
Well, I believe that the reason why it happened is a dramatic expansion in union power. Judge, when you have a monopoly, which is government by definition, and you apply a monopoly model to it, which is the bargaining system that's being used in the government sector, you have real trouble. And this was baked in the cake going back to 1955 in Wisconsin, 1962 when President Roosevelt signed an executive order allowing union bargaining for federal employees. And we've seen this great increase in the number of states that have these bargaining procedures where union officials elect politicians that sit on the other side of the table doing negotiations. And because of the financial crisis we're in, we're seeing it.
That's the point, Charles. As I understand the law in most states, the unions, the government unions, can't go on strike, although they have here, as you know. You remember, the trains were shut down. But the unions get their friends to be on the other side of the bargaining table. We had it in New Jersey. The governor was the boyfriend of the head of the chief labor union with whom he was negotiating. He's no longer the governor. How bad is that?
Well, let's put it this way. I did a study. The top 10 states with the most union workers, with New York at the top, 27%. Out of those top 10, 9 voted for President Obama. Of the bottom 10 states, non-union, 9 were red states. So, but you think about this, huge electoral college votes. If you can get those 10 states to go with you, add in people on welfare, a few others, you've won the White House again, even though you may be destroying the entire country.
Charles Payne, Mark Mix, thank you very much for joining us on this troublesome topic.